Hi, welcome to Law and Justice. I'm Jane Mulcahy. This is a special series on the topic of relationships matter, and today I am really intrigued to be talking to Paul McCartney. Pardon me, I have to do that again. How bad? I'm nervous now after everything. That's okay. We'll start again. Welcome to Law and Justice. I'm Jane Mulcahy. This is a special series on the topic of relationships matter, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Paul McCormack. Hi Paul, how are you?
How you doing, Jane? I'm good, yeah.
That's great. Well, Paul, we're going to talk about something really fascinating and a little bit mind-boggling for me, and I think it's sort of meant to be. That's holotropic breath work. But before we get into that, can you just tell me a bit about yourself and your background, please?
Okay, well, what do you want to start at conception, or shall we move swiftly on?
Wherever you want to start.
Well, I suppose in terms of the breath work, I suppose I should really start there. I was working in a rehab, working with groups and people with dependency problems, and I was kind of flooding. I was struggling with the material, so my supervisor sent me to do a holotropic breathwork session with a man, Jim O'Donoghue. Now, the reason I was in the rehab was I was once a heroin addict myself, and chronic alcoholic and drug addict, and loads and loads of trauma and blah, blah, blah. So, and that takes working through. But I ended up then working in that field, which I didn't really intend to. But as a result, my supervisor said, look, go and do some breath work, see what happens. And I just took to it. It was just, I found the environment, the lack of judgment, the support, the way you can just process material releases itself kind of spontaneously. I just found it great. So after practicing it for a while, and it made working with people easier,
right,
in terms of broadening my perspective, because up to that point I'd very much I worked from the disease model of addiction, which I still subscribe to at some level, but these are just models. All these things, all these psychological tools and structures are just models. And I mean, there's over 440 schools of psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So they're just like maps, and they've all different kind of angles. So that's how I got into holotropic breathwork. I mean, there's probably no need to go in. Well, there's no really need to go into my history as such. I mean, I've told it so many times, and it's not really necessary. What the breathwork did, the difference with the breathwork is I was clean. I was clean a substantial amount of time, and sober and functional, and I had a wife and children, but I was very stressed, probably depressed, and kind of, operating because out of a sense of duty and responsibility and stuff like that. I'm bringing in the dollars and doing this, and breathwork just shifted that. And ever since I've started breathwork, I've actually done exactly what I want to do.
That's lovely. Yeah, how amazing. Yeah. So was that in the 90s, Paul, the early 90s then? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I did my first module, I think, in maybe late 80s.
Okay.
Then I started facilitating in 91, 92. And then I formally qualified in 98 in Australia. I traveled the world with Stan and did different modules and stuff. And yeah, it was all good. Yeah, it was a great adventure. The training itself is an adventure. A lot of people do the training and don't go on to facilitate, because facilitation is a particular. I mean, you've had some experience of breathwork, so it's a kind of a unique space.
Yeah.
And it's not for everybody.
No, I said that when I came back. I know you're not really meant to talk too much about it, but I did mention to my colleagues, and those were my exact words. Now, it wouldn't be for everybody, because you have to be open and a bit curious and all of that. Do you mind sharing with me what your own initial experience was like? I mean, you don't have to go into massive detail, but did it just calm you somewhat, or was it the body work angle that appealed, or
it was more, I mean, I was incredibly violent towards the end of my alcoholism, and then obviously I got into narcotics, so when on the narcotics I was quite passive because I couldn't operate, but then on the cocaine and the alcohol I was extremely violent, and a lot of that had to work itself out.
Okay.
I mean? And thankfully I was able to do that. I was able to scream and roar and shout. And then going back further, and you're familiar, well, you're not familiar, but the concept of coaxes, which is Stan's idea that the systems of experience that come through the different levels that he would see, the perinatal, the biographical, the transpersonal. So, and lots of stuff just unfolded that way, and even the childhood stuff. And there was a tremendous. I come from a tremendously traumatized childhood, which healed itself. The depression, everything passed. I was able to express all those energies, release a lot of material from my body, and the kind of self-abuse, and that just started to stop.
Yeah.
And the level of acceptance, that wasn't there. Okay, I was a member of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. I was, but these were kind of like systems of controlled behavior. Underneath, I still felt tremendous guilt and shame.
Sure.
And a kind of, there's something wrong with me fundamentally. And then through the breathwork, I realized there's nothing wrong with me, or I began to feel there's nothing wrong with me.
Oh, beautiful. That must have felt such a lovely release. And I've become very interested in energy, having not really thought about it for years, but like we are surging energy, are we not?
Masses of vibrating particles, yes, atomic particles. And I mean, you were curious about the body work. The body work is based on energy principles. So, let's say I'm beaten by my father. So there's the violent energy goes into my body, the cells contract. Then there's the energy, what's his motivation? Was it frustration, maybe in sexual frustration with his unhappy marriage, etc. So that all stores itself inside of me, forms kind of, makes a constellation. Jung would call them complexes, where we have all these ideas and dreams and emotions, and then we operate out of these complexes, which are linked to much bigger psychological structures. So in the breathwork, you can access those, your inner healer, and you can release that material safely.
Yeah.
So I don't have to go out and I mean, trauma, as we know, seeks to heal itself. And in a breathwork environment allows that kind of emission of trauma without anyone else getting traumatized. Now, I know the school of Haikomi, and there are schools of therapy that would see breathwork as very Dionysian, the catharsis is dangerous and causes what's called vicarious trauma.
Oh, but right.
I have done, now I've been facilitating since 91, so over 30 years, I've never seen or had anyone report to me that they were vicariously traumatized. I have had people say to me, I've been really activated. The sound of that woman screaming, or the sound of that man banging the thing, or the sound of that person saying that really threw me into something.
Yeah.
And that's why, as we said earlier, it isn't for everyone, because you've got to be able to tolerate that discomfort.
Yes.
You've got to be able to negotiate what gets activated in you in that particularly intense environment. So it isn't for everybody. Thankfully, there are many other ways. Simple meditation. Meditation is probably the best practice that anyone could engage in. Everything will rise up in meditation.
Right.
So, I don't see breathwork. I don't see a one road or a one kind of model solution to people healing. I mean, what is healing? Healing is just arriving at acceptance.
Right.
Nature of your reality. I mean, there's no fixing. There's no curing.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point, that there is no undoing, and what we might have done to other people at a time of intense stress or overwhelm, there's no changing that. There's not even changing our present circumstances necessarily. So that is actually a very interesting point, Paul, about acceptance and how we often fight against things. We fight against the realities. And
oh, totally. I mean, I think that's most people's fundamental problem, is an inability to accept reality.
Yeah, it's definitely mine a lot of the time.
It's a lot of people's, and it's nice and simple.
Yeah.
And like a lot of therapies are to come to accept the nature, the nature of your reality. So my nature, and to accept that in those earlier years, yes, I had very violent experiences in the breathwork, but that's where they stayed. So the level of violence, like in terms of because I would still be acting out violently by being sarcastic or being smart, right, or engaging in atrocious kind of behavior with people. So I was able to then move that drama into a well-contained environment. And it's much the same way as, I mean, I'm also involved in entertainment, and there is a lot of very dysfunctional people in entertainment, because it's an area where people can act out, and they can be secure and neurotic and whatever, and it facilitates that.
Yeah.
You don't have to have that kind of persona that you need in an office environment, or insurance, or banking, or auctioneering, or
Yes, the ability to rein it in a bit.
Well, you have to keep a certain very strong persona. I mean, I sold my parents' house recently, and I went up. I mean, this is a terrible thing to say, but I went up, and the auctioneer was there with the prospective buyers, and they brought their two sets of parents.
Right.
And the woman says to me, "Oh my God, what a beautiful home! You must have been so happy." And without even thinking, I said to her, "Oh no, myself and my sister called this out switch when we were children." And I could see the woman and say, "Oh God, you have a very strange sense of humor, Paul." And I said, "I'm not joking." And then I could see she just couldn't process it. You
Yes,
understand?
it was a bit too honest for
And
the
then I
sale of the
thought, I
house.
shouldn't have even said that. And there's the prospective buyers kind of looking at each other. So of course, I said to them, "Look, hey, yeah, I'm sure you're going to be very happy and because it is a beautiful place."
Yeah.
But that's not how myself and my sister experienced it.
Yes.
You
Well, a
understand what I
house
mean?
or a home is more than a house for
Yeah. So
sure.
our reality was difficult, and we both negotiated that in different ways, and thankfully, it all resolved itself. But what I'm saying there is that woman she was, "Oh, I have to go to another appointment now," and she literally just ran off.
Yes, she was on. Yeah,
She wasn't interested.
couldn't cope at all.
So, and afterwards, I kind of thought I probably shouldn't have said that now, really. But so
Yeah, I was very frank and honest. That's
that's
the
what's
thing,
happened.
the
Yeah,
filter as well. Yeah, but it
that's
was
what I
also,
do. I just say what I say a lot of the time.
yeah,
Um, and it can be good, it can be bad, but that's who I am. And by being myself, which breathwork has really facilitated, I give you permission to be who you are. You don't have
yeah,
to be false or disingenuous or play games. Yes, of
yeah,
course, there's an appropriateness and a certain respect, obviously a fundamental respect for everybody, their psychic rights and their souls, but we don't have to take stuff incredibly intensely seriously.
no.
There is a
And
play, it's Maya.
yes, just that as well reminded me of the difficulties that so many of us have being authentic or knowing really who we are because of all these. I mean, I'm reading a lot about autism at the moment and the masks, but in a way, we all do need these masks or personas too. And in fact, holotropic breath work does work with masks, or certainly in the session I was in, we painted masks.
Oh,
And
that would do, did we? Yeah, we do all because we have a coffin in Westport where we get people to go into the coffin
oh wow.
and yeah, that's so. And then next year we're going to actually bury them alive. So um yeah, because it is death rebirth. Everything, all
Yeah,
therapy
okay.
is about loss. Any therapy, any healing is about accepting the loss, isn't it? It's the loss of
Mm.
childhood, loss of wanting a parent, loss of a relationship, loss of, loss, death rebirth. But I mean, we have to die first before we can be reborn. I mean,
Yeah.
it's interesting you speak about that, the myth of self.
Mm-hmm.
And it is where you're so attached. And that is, breathwork is very good that way in that it's gentle. Breathwork comes from Stan Grof. Stan Grof used LSD around the time Hoffman synthesized it. Sandoff used it, and Stan experimented, worked with people dying of cancer. And they found incredible freedom from taking the LSD. They found a spiritual freedom. They didn't have that terror of dying and it's all going to end. They
Mm.
realized there's so much more than just me and my little story. And that is a tremendous freedom if people can find that. I've
Yes.
worked as a therapist for years, and people come in and they tell their story, and you try to encourage them like it's a story. You're telling yourself a story, and the
Yeah.
more you tell yourself that story, the more you'll believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very difficult. It's very difficult, but that's when going back to meditation and fundamentally Buddhism and those type of spiritual systems, they encourage loss of self. Do
Yeah.
not be so attached to the self. Do not be so attached to the story of the great Paul and this and my house and my wife and my kids and my career and my this, But that's the ego.
Yeah.
So breathwork is a gentle way. LSD is, I'm not sure whether you've taken LSD. You don't have to answer that question on your podcast, but
I
um,
haven't, but I'm interested. I'm more and more interested in it. Yeah.
psychedelics are very strong. But there's no kind of, with the breathwork, you can open your eyes. You can go up and go out the toilet. You can with the psychedelics, you have to negotiate it.
Mm.
And
There's no
it's
getting
great.
out of it at that
No,
time. Yeah.
no. It's
Yeah.
very intense, and it's also a substance. So the lovely thing about breathwork is it's not a substance. It's your breath. It's your inner healer. It's kind of clean, if you want to call it that. I
Sure.
mean, it's because there is a lot of people who would see psychedelics that as drugs, which I suppose they are,
Yeah.
but and then drugs have such a terrible name. So I think breathwork is a great way for people who want to explore, do deep inner exploration. And it isn't just about trauma, which is a pity. What's happened is it's become retail like that. But
Right.
originally when I started doing it, we used to encourage artists and creative people, and a lot of
Okay.
them would come as well, just you know, just to explore wider
Yeah.
fields and to step out of the kind of limitations of their own ego, to see what's beyond.
Yeah, I can see great benefit in that. And also, for the likes of myself to get out of your head a bit, you know, okay, I was interpreting as I went a bit, but there were definite times when the physical sensations, the visceral sensations, it took over a bit, you know. So I think tuning a bit more into the body is something we all should do a bit more of anyway, and kind of become more aware of our energy. And also what I really loved in the session was the energetic exchange between people at various points, you know, even the kind of the honor of sharing space with other people, and maybe seeing them go through something deep and meaningful that I might know what it was, but you know, there's something
It's
is
powerful, isn't it? Yeah,
it is quite
I'm always
powerful.
kind of humbled by that. Like I was in Austria 2 weeks ago, we did a module on death and dying. So it was a training module. So it was 6 days, and there's lots of lectures and exploring different aspects of death and dying. But like that was the first time I'd kind of worked in that particular venue, but you know, nobody reacted to me. I mean, I was busy, people engaging me. And I did say to someone at one stage, as I moved from mat to mat during the breathwork session and not during the other sessions,
Mm.
it was like stepping into different movies,
Yeah.
you know, as you step into the different energy fields. And I suppose that's kind of the art of facilitation, is learning to do that so that I'm there simply to support people's process. I'm not actually doing anything, believe it or not. Like you mentioned the body work, but it's not really body work. It's not like osteopathy or
Mm.
massage. Or it's I'm encouraging you, if energy rises in you, which is the release of
Mm.
some sort of something in your energetic
Mm.
body. And you know, we could spend hours talking about the chakras
Mm.
and about different points and different glands, and but it is energy. So
Mm.
energy, it's very nebulous, but it's factual.
Mm.
Like psychics read energy, they can
Yeah.
read energy. So Maura Lumberg, if you ever went to see her, could look at you and go, "Oh, you had a little blue tricycle when you were 3 years old," and she'd see it in your energy system. Oh,
Bizarre.
yeah, but on 100%. So she saw it. It wasn't. She wasn't like, there are lots of charlatans and
Mm.
people who play, but people, real energy workers, can see, you know, can connect with the energy. So in the breath work, because you're not, your filter is gone, and your inner healer that, you know, you've let go, your energy system is up and running.
Yeah.
And where there are blocks, in the same way as in Buddhism, when you meditate and you get sensations and you focus on the sensations so that it releases the karma, it's the same sort of idea. Karma is kind of, you know, your personal karma,
Mm.
manifesting energetically, and all we do is help you focus on that. We don't actually
Yes.
do anything as such, if you understand. But if it's really strong, then we offer great resistance. If it's mild, I can just put my hand on your shoulder, or to speak to you and say, really
Yeah.
breathe in wherever the sensation is. And that's all you have to do, because your body cannot lie, but
Yeah.
your mind will lie constantly. Your mind, you know, look at all the little fabrications you have around you that make up the story of who Jane is,
Yeah.
you
There's
know.
plenty of them, plenty of clutter. I do have I put this
Oh, you have your
there.
mandala.
That's
Great.
my mandala, yeah, because I was going to go, well, maybe we'll come back to the mandala, because I did want to just ask you um about the actual, you're a therapist as well, and Debbie on the way down, she gave me a lift. She was the other facilitator, but she said, you know, actually someone doing a breathwork session can get more benefit in a weekend, which is what I did, than they might get in 4 years of therapy. um so so are there certain benefits that you can get from this process in a kind of quicker, more efficient way for some people? Maybe not all, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, 4 years may have been a certain amount of hyperbole, but I do agree with her. I mean, I've had that personal experience myself. Both my parents died last year, and my mother-in-law and two friends.
I'm
So I thought
sorry.
I'll go into therapy myself. Specifically for this, I did about 10 sessions with the woman, and then I did a little bit of breathing, and I cleared more in the few minutes of breathing than I was able to access with the lady herself. And it's not her fault or my fault.
Mm,
It's the environment. It's, as you say, it's the nature of breathwork that the stuff was in my body.
right.
So dialoguing is fantastic, but it's, I need to release it.
Yeah, you felt it somewhere in various parts of your body, right?
in the energy system somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's the fascinating thing. I had a friend, Ray, and he was dying of cancer, and he did a breath work, and he did a mandala of his body, and he did these little red spots. He went to the hospital, and the red spots were exactly where all the cancer nodes were.
Wow.
So, there's thousands of examples of stuff like that, like thousands of examples of people experiencing their birth, remembering things, smells. It's just, so it opens up a level of consciousness, because consciousness is not, I'm born and then consciousness fires up like an electric bulb. Consciousness is a flow of energy that, luckily for someone like me, I've lots of access to it. I'm very blessed.
Yeah.
Because of lots of different things. And even my mother, I thanked her for all the abuse of my father, because that abuse and that violence opened me up to a whole world
Right.
of working in relationship, of sitting with people, of negotiating people's pain, and of me not going, oh my God, that's terrible, but tell me more.
Yeah, right.
And being there for them. And that's all. Yeah, and that's all we need to be, is just to be there. I don't need to, as I go on much further, I don't really therapize much now anymore.
Right.
That's sort of way I like to do breath work. I'd much prefer I love music, so I much prefer singing songs, or I started doing stand-up comedy. I much
Right.
prefer people to celebrate who they are. Do you understand?
Yeah,
Coming
yeah.
back to being authentic.
Yeah.
It's about being authentic.
Yeah.
So my struggle with structured therapy is it's not authentic.
Right.
Someone sitting in my chair over there telling me a story, and that's not authentic. Now, if I could go to their house and sit
Yes,
in
I
their
get you. Yeah.
and watch them, and that's very authentic. But that doesn't work. I actually tried that. I'm trained in Gestalt therapy as well, so I tried going to people's houses, and it just doesn't work, sadly. So you have to have this kind of container where they step away from their routine and do it. That's just a general comment on therapy. But breathwork provides a space where people, as you said, can be really authentic as they are. There doesn't have to be any performance.
Yeah, or they can at least start that process as well, because it mightn't happen, I guess in one session or one weekend for them. But there is just, it was for me, a strange but special experience. And afterwards, then I did read The Holotropic Mind, because
great
I was
book.
interested in finding out more. And it was very fascinating, but kind of blew my mind at times. Can you tell us a bit about the transpersonal dimension of the breath work and some of the experiences that people had? You mentioned there that people can experience bits of their own birth, and that there's these matrices that Groff and other writers describe. Some of the things that you might have witnessed.
Stan came up with the model. So, as I said, Stan took quite a bit of LSD.
Right.
Realized that he was a trained psychoanalyst, so he was coming from a Freudian perspective, and you're familiar with Newton and René Descartes. I think therefore I am, and there's the physical world and all that. So his experience with the LSD blew his mind, because he just realized, hang on, this is not just it.
Yeah.
This is something that we perceive and we interpret, and it's encoded, but there's so much more going on. So out of that, then he tried to draw a map of his experiences in the LSD, his own, as he did it himself and as he did it with other people. And so there's the perinatal, which is to do with conception and birth. There's the biographical, as you know, our stories from birth to whatever death. And then there's the transpersonal. These were kind of three major areas that he kind of mapped out. And the biggest map he drew was in the perinatal, where we're in the womb and we're in the amniotic fluid. Then the process of being born, and we get stuck in the canal. Then there's a fight to get out, and then there's out. So the kind of 4 stages, BPM 1 to 4. And in his theory, those stages make a huge imprint on us as individuals. So you could be a very first matrix person, and if it was a good womb, then you're very happy and you feel very secure and you float, and the world is a lovely place. If it was a bad womb, or your mother tried to abort you, or you lived in a war zone or toxicity, then you could be very toxic. Then there's people who are third matrix, who love jumping out of airplanes and excitement and drama. Second matrix is the worst. People who are depressed because they're stuck and they can't make movements, and then the very free, the people in the fourth matrix. So it seems to hold true, like in my experience, that people tend to be one of the major matrices in their processes, but then as time goes on. So that's the perinatal aspect. But then biographical, we all know it's our story, what happened to me, my life. So transpersonal is beyond this skin encapsulated ego. It's not Paul.
Right.
So transpersonal is literally beyond the personal.
Mm.
So as I say, when I'm explaining it to the participants, I've never experienced, me personally, I've never experienced being a tractor or a stapler, but I've experienced anything that has a consciousness that
Right.
has. So that's wild, I could be a leaf blowing in the wind. I could be a fly buzzing around the garden. I could be an antelope running across the plains. I could believe I was an ancient man back in Chinese times. The last time I breathed in Austria, I was screaming in what they said was Japanese. I don't know Japanese. I've never been to Japan.
Right.
But shouting orders and barking out and at troops and and they all thought it was.
In what you experienced, did you feel like you were Japanese?
Yeah, I knew I was a general telling my troops that get out and fight for the
survival.
And for your cause, and don't be afraid. And
wow.
But at the same time feeling the anguish, and that's where that's where, like, on a transpersonal level, I'm instructing people to sacrifice and make sacrifices. Then you can bring that into your biographical, where you're telling people you're going to have to do stuff that's really uncomfortable. And that's going to cause you distress, which we all do. So that it operates at different levels. So the transpersonal it's so vague, and yet it's not. It's I don't know if you're familiar with Carl Jung and his ideas.
A little bit, yeah.
He speaks of the collective unconscious, where our consciousness is there, it's everywhere, it's collective, and we can tap into it in our dreams and in non-ordinary states of consciousness. Because in our ordinary state now, you're focused on me and the computer and getting the Zoom right and the agenda and the time. But if you just floated off now, beyond that ordinary state of consciousness, God knows what you'd access.
Yeah.
Is that what I mean? Yeah.
That is really intriguing, I think, because especially, as you say, the breathwork doesn't involve taking any substance. No. It's only breathing faster and deeper to music. And just from my own experience, quite quickly, I felt kind of like there was saline or salt water up my nose. It was bizarre how quickly, and the tingling in the hands that it happened. But I did find it very interesting reading the book, how common across the world when they've done these workshops, that there are certain things from the collective unconscious, the archetypes or whatever, that holds true regardless. That is quite remarkable. And then also I found it interesting as a researcher that research has been slow to kind of get in there and try to do too much to promote this practice, I guess.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, holotropic breathwork was only one breathwork technique, a bit like the 440 schools of therapy. There are hundreds of breathwork practitioners, and the fundamentalists, the yoga, Buddhism, they all use breath. And there's different types of yoga. Kundalini yoga uses the breath of fire; it's very fast. In Vipassana meditation, we use the breath to scan, but but that's only one branch of Buddhism. There's loads. So breath is really fundamental. It's a fundamental tool. I mean, the holotropic breathwork, if you like, is a trademark.
Yeah.
If we bring it down to its basic, the term holotropic, holo, hold, trepien, moving towards, it's something that Stan and Christina developed, and they call it holotropic. Now, if you go onto Google and search, there's loads of people talking about holotropic breathwork. It's not the trademark, it's not the system that Stan, but that's a separate issue. That's a kind of business and a structured issue. Nobody has got corner of the market of breathing. Like the last thing we do is we breathe. We pass, and that is the moment of revelation.
Yes.
It's the point of death. So I'm not in any big hurry to be completely understand everything, because then it means off I go to the incarnation. But
fair enough.
But breathing is very powerful. And yes, I mean, I trained as a Jungian analyst before I came across holotropic breathwork. So I suppose, but Buddhism, holotropic breathwork, Jungian analysis, and even the 12-step model of recovery in its theoretical framework all coexist very well together.
Do you mean they're about the higher power kind of side of?
Well, they're about the spiritual dimension. Yeah. Yes, they're about the acceptance that there's more than just this. This and whatever that is. I mean, that's the great thing about transpersonal psychology. It allows for the presence of the spiritual and the divine. It isn't the opium of the masses, or some sort of projection of my mind. The divine does exist. And for people who drink ayahuasca or other, they will report that they stand in the presence of something that they can't explain.
Yeah.
Even Stan himself would say that ayahuasca has a spirit, when he was interviewed about which of the psychedelics, but his personal favorite is LSD,
Right.
because that's what brought him into this whole, my God, it isn't
Yeah.
all mechanistic Newtonian Cartesian science. There's something much more out there. And that we need to make allowance. And you did refer to it there, but it's such a soft science, psychology. I mean, how do you prove this? At least if you have a 2x4 bit of wood and some nails, it's kind of, again, the Newtonians can go, look, bit of wood, nail.
Yeah.
There, we can all see it. But the rest is kind of theoretical.
Yes. Yeah, but I suppose as well, it's about what do we consider evidence, or what is sufficiently robust, to qualify. But for me, I really am driven by people's stories, and if enough people tell stories of a particular kind and a particular sort of experience. I mean, for me, I had none of the sort of psychedelic visions that some people had. Mine was it was more sensory. But I know if I did it another time or multiple other times, who knows what might come of that. But the kind of when I was reading the book, I certainly found it very interesting, the idea of maybe, the past lives type of dimension, that someone could imagine being a previous historical figure or something like that. Groff tells the story of a monk in Russia, I think it was in the caves. It was hard for my rational self to imagine, but that's because of the limits of my current consciousness, I guess.
Well, it's your dominant function, Jung would say, that
Yeah.
thinking is your dominant function. So Jung's idea of individuation, which flows nicely into breathwork, is that we will individuate or become whole through our inferior function.
Right.
So if thinking is dominant function, then you need to work out of an inferior function.
Right.
Which might be feeling or intuition. Yeah. And that's exactly what you got. I mean, think of this, how brilliant this is. In the breathwork, you got into feeling. You didn't get into visions and all sorts of esoteric stuff. You got into feeling.
Yeah.
So it brought you to your inferior function. Your inner healer brought you simply by you lying there, listening to some evocative music and breathing. And hopefully feeling that with me and Debbie there, you felt safe enough, which most people say they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's a great example in your own personal experience that you got what you needed. And that's the challenge of breathwork. People come to me or they send me clients and my client needs this. And I'd have to say to them, I can't tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We can't. We have to trust that whatever presents itself is what the client needs in that moment.
Yeah.
We'll support that. And you got what you needed. The next thing is, do you then take that anywhere? Or do you kind of go, oh, that was really interesting. Now let's get back to the analysis.
Yeah. No, I'd be totally, I'm all about the body now, really, because I do know that I'm holding stress, particularly since COVID, in my body, and recently started hot yoga. So anything that will make me feel just a bit more calm and at peace in the body. You forget about the mind, really, but I just know that they're really, it's all together. It's, you
body,
can't
mind, and spirit.
Yeah. But one thing I'd like to ask about as well from the book was that intrigued me a little bit, was the discussion about the pre-birth experiences, the being maybe stuck in the canal or whatever. And as well as the transpersonal bit, that there was a line, something to do with mainstream psychiatry and mental health being very focused on what happens after birth and very focused on trauma. And I found that interesting, because I was thinking, is that really mainstream? Maybe it is now, but I thought it wasn't necessarily mainstream. And was it suggesting that really we need to look more at the perinatal, as well as potentially past life residue that might be there? What would your own view be about that?
I think, definitely in earlier years, classic psychology, it has been kind of cause and effect.
Right.
and based on operant conditioning and behaviorism. And behaviorism, has got a great place to hold, that we are products of our environment, we are products of our upbringing, there is conditioning, all that type of stuff. So they in the main, they don't give a lot of credence to the perinatal.
Right.
So but as more and more now, because mothers have been playing classical music to their children when they were pregnant and reading stories, it's now emerging more and more. Hang on, there is, people are recording. See, the original theory, because the myelin cortex that's on the brain doesn't form till after birth, then people are saying, how can you possibly have any memories or be building any structures? But it's now been well proven that people can remember all sorts of stuff because it's stored cellularly, cellular memory. I'm sure you've heard that term. So, I think Stan used to have a beef, but I don't know if it's quite as they're not as narrow-minded or as restrictive that, birth, you're born, immediately there's the good breast, because Freud says, well, it's when you suck on the good breast. I mean, no, it's not. I mean, Freud has not been debunked, but Freudian theory has, its limitations have been challenged, and definitely there is a more expanded view. But in the main, it's still conditioning, it's still behaviorism with rule roost, definitely. And the major plank of psychiatry is medication, is allopathy.
Yeah.
It's a medical model. You have a disease, we can fix it through. We haven't got time to give you therapy or put you into an environment where you can work with people, so we'll give you medication. I mean, even tomorrow I have a workshop, and there's 3 people coming who are all on antipsychotic medication because they reported having general anxiety about stuff. Like, I would be very critical of that. I think the psychiatrist has been too quick to give them the medication, but they have to respect that. They go to the psychiatrist, they ask his advice, he gives them the medication. That's the system they're in. It's a little bit sad because obviously the dumbing down that does, it also precludes them from accessing all sorts of stuff. It really narrows the bandwidth of their emotional and, if you like, spiritual experience. So, and also it will dumb down their ability in the breathwork it'll narrow the bandwidth.
Right. Okay. Because they're medicated.
The receptors are kind of challenged, but at the same time, the environment is just, as you said, the energetic environment of the group just opens people's eyes, and the little chats they have, and even to watch other people having experiences, it kind of validates back to, wow. Because I was thinking about this, a lot of schizophrenics, there's nothing wrong with them really. It's just that we don't like what they're talking about, and we don't like the fact that their filters are wide open and they're receiving all sorts of material and they can't process it and they need help with that. But I mean, there's actually nothing wrong with them. They're just not fitting in to the model that we expect.
The norms of behavior, and being able to filter and dampen down and quiet the messages. It's an interesting one. But in the workshops as well that you've participated in or facilitated over the years, is there a dominant kind of thing that people work through, like or does it vary from the person?
No, it's I mean, like, because there's a little bit of infighting or outfighting going on between Stan and other people, and there's splinters, as there always is. But like, most of the people who come to our workshops don't ask about Stan Groff.
They don't
care. You know what I mean? They just come and they have their experience. And as you know, our workshops are experiential. It's only when I go abroad do we have to have didactic components, because it's a training.
Right.
But here in Ireland, all the workshops are experiential. It's about having the experience. So, and that's what people come for, is to have that experience, because they feel the liberation. They feel the shift in their energy afterwards. And it may not be conscious. The weakness of Stan's model was what's called integration. So let's say, which is great to hear you saying, I'm now following the body, because, you go and do a breath work and you get all these messages about getting into your body and doing stuff. You need to integrate that then to get the benefits. Otherwise, you can just keep going back and having another experience. So integration is very important, which is not part of the workshop, if you like. Right. The workshop is about having the experience, connecting with others, feeling the energy that we spoke about. Integration then is about taking that, like you have that mandala behind you, meditating on the mandala, maybe doing more mandalas, spending time in nature, maybe engaging in yoga, physical exercise, changing small concrete specific behavioral changes that will move you towards being more whole. And the more whole you are, the less you are caught up in the story of Jane.
Yeah.
Like, think about
it. That sounds great.
Well,
That
but think
sounds
about
great.
it. When you're really happy, it's not all about Jane, is it?
No, it's not.
You're in relationship, because coming back to some of the themes of what you want to talk about, apart from the breathwork, you are in right relationship. You feel connected, you feel part of, and you just flow.
Yeah.
You're just part of something. So that's wonderful to be able to access that and to enjoy and celebrate ourselves with others just because we're alive, because we're conscious, sentient beings.
Yeah. I love that.
Because I've our own medals across my chest, or because I've done 5,000 workshops, or because I've, 15 letters after my name, which, is all great, but that's not what really matters.
Yeah, no, it's ultimately meaningless if we feel miserable and all kind of, miserable and stressed internally. I do really like that about the greater connection to others, because what else really matters ultimately?
Well, that's a personal decision, but I mean, it matter. That's what matters to me. I love bringing people together. I love making connections, whether it be in therapeutic circles or in entertainment circles or whatever, even in sport. I mean, I have lots of interests, and I'm very lucky to have a very rich life.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very blessed. And it's nice to be able to share that with, because life is for living is the way I'd see it. But I understand depression. I understand people committing suicide. I understand people feeling they're in holes they can't get out of, all that type of stuff. And it's nice to be able to offer space, definitely for depression. Breathwork is fantastic.
Right.
If you can come and express, because depression to me is an emotion.
Yeah.
So it's a flow of libido inwards. If you're depressed, you're all contracted.
Right.
And I think essentially it's anger that you flows inwards because you're not able to express it.
Yes.
So if you find a space, then that's one thing. But there are other things, like your beautiful mandala there. So you suddenly discover you have great artistic talent.
Yeah, just a little bit more about the mandala. What is the purpose? Is that about integration, or just a kind of
Yeah, it's an integrative tool.
Okay.
Because obviously in the 202 to 3 hours, it's about 3 hours, and so much stuff flows around. But when you sit down then and do the mandala, it's kind of the essence of the experience. You're capturing like an instamatic picture, an essential component, while you're still in kind of a non-ordinary state. And the symbolism that's contained in the mandala is personally significant for you. So you can look at it afterwards. And even if you look at it and think, oh, I don't know what that is, your unconscious knows what it is. And then your unconscious can work with that. And then, because that's what drives us.
Yes.
Isn't it? As the two of us sit here, we have all this stuff. We're like the tip of our fingernail is our consciousness, and the rest of us all have back going, yoing. So if we work with that, and the mandalas act as a tool for that, incredible tool. And I mean, they can be much, much deeper. I have loads of stories about mandalas and the significance of mandalas, and Stan has, and there's a whole site. There's a mandala website.
Oh, is there? Okay.
Yeah, and there's music websites, and there's so many. There's tons of sharing international, and I think it is amazing, as you said, that all around the world people are engaging in this kind of ritual. And it's not religious, it's not sexually denominated, it's not, it's completely non-denominational. It's fantastic. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, there are many things like that. I mean, there's sports like that too, and other things, but it's great to know that there's an activity that can happen globally that we can all share in.
Yeah, but I would think maybe it's just because I haven't connected with people in that type of way, but there was something about the space and the compassion, and again, I'm very interested in touch, because we live in a world where we don't often touch people who we don't know. And this is why the bodywork dimension for me was really interesting. Like, people would be offered a hug, of course, if they didn't want one or weren't comfortable, it wouldn't be, forced on them. But many people, like Debbie's hugs, I was kind of going, oh, like that woman was made for hugging. I don't know what it was. You'd swear I never had a hug myself. But I just thought that was a lovely dimension too, and it's sort of, I would think, a bit at odds with mainstream psychiatry or psychology, where there may not be too much hugging, perhaps, if people needed it. And people might say boundaries, but it was something that struck me as very nice. And
well, analytic needs or our needs to be held are vital.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many indigenous tribes where the babies are carried for the first 6 months by the mothers and are always in touch with their bodies and stuff.
Yeah.
And we've lots of reports of people being put in taken away from their mothers at birth, and
Yeah.
that having effects too. I mean, it does fascinate me that, as I said, like in Austria, when I was lying there a few weeks ago with people I'd never met before, and they were being held or whatever, and it was healing. It
Yeah.
wasn't. There was nothing intrusive. Now, I mean, I've no agendas with it, and
Mm.
obviously I'm a facilitator, so just. But yeah, it does fascinate me sometimes that I'd be in my car and then an hour later I'm lying on a mattress with someone.
Yeah.
The
And being
respect.
very tender and saying this
Yeah,
is
no,
okay,
in a
or
very healing exchange,
yeah.
definitely. So that's quite an honor to be part of that, and it is the part that our energy is clean, that I really am not interested in people's energy.
Mm.
If you understand, in taking it or whatever. I'm
Yes.
also,
Yeah.
I suppose my main plank of work would be shamanic now, and shamanism is all about power,
Mm.
the exchange of power and the manipulation of power.
All right.
I'm not interested in people's power, but I'm interested in
Mhm.
people being powerful.
Yeah.
So that makes it easy for me, and for most of the people I've come across in the breathwork world and the transpersonal perspective, where it's not about me, it's about you and your process, and
Mm.
how we can support that process,
Mm-hmm.
and how we can bow to that, and because that's what we find amazing and is humbling and is enriching, is to see you become whole,
Mm.
to see people. I've seen so many people become much more whole. I mean, there's no magic cure.
Mm.
We all have our issues and our problems, but we can really become very authentic and really celebrate. Which maybe brings me to the question you asked, which I'm not a politician, I'm not a policymaker, but I have noticed, especially as I travel Europe and somewhat here, that a lot of the people involved in breathwork are also involved in caring professions, or a lot more in Europe. They're involved in policy making and in
All right.
planning, and so that kind of attitude, that kind of paradigm working at the back of their minds has got to influence how they make decisions, implement policies, interact with other people. So I know it's a drop in the ocean, because the really dangerous and egotistical people are the ones who get to the top, but they're not the ones who
Oftentimes.
do all the work. So sometimes people can work at lower levels in organizations and people don't know, and so
Mm.
I would be optimistic.
That's really interesting, because I would think you couldn't go through a weekend session with a group and not be touched by it in some way, and just also our interconnectedness, the fact that we can certainly afford someone a bit of solace at a difficult moment as well, and just even the acceptance of the experience. I think it's very positive that people from policy and those type of decision-making circles are among the participants.
Yeah, no, it's getting better.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, look, Paul, thank you
yeah,
so
we've been here
much.
a long time now. People, if anybody's watching this, they're asleep.
Yeah, well, hopefully they're accessing their bodies and
Well,
having
that's
a
a good
really
point.
lovely time with it.
We should have done some kind of grounding or meditation exercise. But I mean, as you can say, like you can see, we could talk for hours. It's an enormous field. We could take even one of the matrices and speak about it for hours as well.
We
And
could
yeah,
maybe another time, but I am so grateful that you shared 52 minutes or thereabouts with me today, Paul. It's been wonderful talking to you. This is
great.
the Relationship Matters with me and Paul McCormack. Thanks so much again for tuning in and for being with me, Paul.